Hey, welcome back to my channel. So, today, what are we talking about? The light, the dark, and our shadow, feminine energy, masculine energy, how I think of it in a grid form, basically. So, in a way for me to explain this in a way that I feel like other people will understand, I had to write it down. Okay. And like a graph formation. Okay, so when we first are kids, we get a grid like this, right? And it's just like, oh, it's an L, a perfectly L formation. But when you get a little older, they're like, oh, actually, friend, actually, that's just one part of the graph, right? It is like this. It's a T, and you've been learning only about one quadrant in particular, but there's total of 4. So, if you think about how we think of sex, aka the sexes, female, male, and then later there are a few other ones, which that's another reason why I know this is dead on, because even in science, there's not only 2 sexes. There's more than 1 sex. There's more than 2 sexes, because we have intersex individuals. So, that's why it just doesn't make sense there's 2. 2 is the idea that we're still just thinking linear. Linear. The world isn't linear. It might seem like that in our tiny little fragile human minds, but it's not. So, if this is the x-axis, and this is the y-axis, and we're staying here, and you always start at origin. So source energy, the thing we all come from, the maker of all universes, the origin of everything, would be source in the middle. And you first start off on your x-axis in the feminine energy. Later, you figure out what masculine energy you go to. Are you catching my drift, people? Are you catching my drift? Okay. So, how I like to think of it is, this is this axis, and I said this was -1, and that's water, and +1 was earth. And then positive y is fire. Negative y is air. Would you understand what I was saying? I feel like you can come, you're with me, right? Okay, so if we think of there's feminine, masculine energy, and then there's like light and shadow, very similar concept, right? So you would have you start off with your X, aka with your shadow, and then you figure out your light. But this is the funny part about that is, your light. When we talk about something being evil or not, it has nothing to do with your light and shadow. I know, what? I've never been told that. I know, people lie all the time. So, if you've ever seen a Venn diagram, okay? A Venn diagram is a circle and another circle. And there's this little part in the middle that overlaps. And you're like, oh, I feel this way, or I feel this way. And then this is like both. But this is the differences. So that first triangle that I made here is here. And there's another one here. And they can overlap. And they can say hello to each other. Now that would be my difference between good and evil. And then, I know this is going to be like, where are you going with this? If you overlap the same thing this way and this way, make another Venn diagram. Now we have the full ass picture. And things aren't 4, it just became 16. So what are the other 2? And this is why I go back to the idea of positive, negative, both, and neither. Everything breaks down to the 4 components. After you go from the 4 components, it's times 4, which is 16. Okay, and that's how I think about it. So now it's become a jumbled mess. But if you're following me, I feel like you got it. So, Why is this important? Why is this positive, negative thing here? Why did I bring up? Because the point is that sometimes spirit has to explain to you on step one. Right? Step one. Then spirit comes back and says, oh, you ready for step two? And then you're told the other thing I brought up. And it's like step three, the next thing. Each step is getting you closer to more enlightenment, more knowledge, more understanding of yourself and the cosmos and other people and the planets and the animals and why we're here, blah, blah, blah. So, when I bring up your light, your shadow, and also feminine and masculine, feminine doesn't inherently mean shadow, even though it is, if you think of yin and yang, kind of is. Ooh, because this is why I love the Taoists so much. They have the yin and yang symbol. And how it works. We have it here, and I'm just going to color that in. I'm going to color that in. And then I'm going to color that in. If you thought of it, you'd be like, oh, that's the feminine principle. There's the masculine principle. But then another way you could think of it is, this is water. This is fire. So that's air. And that little circle is earth. Because, which is the whole point of this video, is to get into the concept of what are the four elements and why I talk about them in the way that I do. So, going back, we have water and earth, the feminine principles. We have fire and air, the masculine principles. But water is the dark feminine. Earth is the light feminine. Okay? Fire is the light masculine, and air is the dark masculine. Now, in the yin and yang, dark is perceived as also a feminine thing. So, you would almost think of water as like a feminine, and earth as a masculine feminine, fire as masculine, and air as a feminine masculine. And that's why, as a joke to myself, I like to joke that like earth would be like a butch lesbian and air would be like a twink gay boy. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, that's my funny way of remembering it. You can think of your own reasoning or something you think about gender norms fuckery, right? But the whole point is two are completely in the energy of feminine masculine, but the other two are a mixture. One is more dominant because earth is a feminine sign, but it's a masculine feminine sign. And how is it? Because of the light. Light is associated, yes, with masculinity, but also youth. Just like the shadow is, well, not the shadow. The dark is associated with like old wisdom, regeneration, decay, that kind of thing. Just almost like when I think of like the great goddesses, that kind of energy. So the reason why I feel like all this just all ties in. Because as humans, it's really hard to put us in boxes, but our brain is literally built to categorize things. And the older that we get, the better we get at categorizing. And so if we're gonna just do it anyways, since our brain is gonna do it anyways, let's figure out to say, you know what, brain, you've been doing a lot of work, and we're gonna help you out by helping you make better categories for things and for people. This will help us as people not only become more open, but then like open to new ideas and new experiences and things of that nature, because we'll understand when we're comfortable, when we're uncomfortable, and be able to discern what is the good kind of uncomfortable, what's the not so good uncomfortable. Not so good uncomfortable is you're in a situation where you can be abused. A good uncomfortable situation, I would say, is getting out of your comfort zone. I don't like to skydive, but you know what? Someone just invited me. I've never fucking done it. It's gonna be super safe. I'm lit. Let's go. Right? So a lot of times that will happen. So the idea of like even good and bad is a lot of times how we just use words to differentiate like what is better for you or worse for you. But I want to get out of the idea that your light and your shadow works the same way. I know, she brought it back finally. What? Okay, so your light self is a lot of times that upper half of your existence and how you think of things, keeping things, I almost want to say almost like the manic part of us all, the real excited childlike, because the light is youthful energy, it's enthusiasm, it's growing, we can do stuff, and again in that masculine energy of growing, action orientedness, whatever. Feminine energy is you're perfect exactly the way you are. Lower primal, what in the shadow, basically. Your shadow is the idea of wisdom through ancestors, tradition, and the idea of stability, and also chipping away at things. So the reason why in my first graph it was on the -1 side is because think of water. Water, if it sits in a pool long enough, it can crack that pool. When we think of rivers, it softens the rocks on the side eventually, smooths it out. And when it comes to oil, water grinded dinosaur bones into oil because of constant pressure over time. So the idea of taking something away from something to make it different. So you had a lump of clay, and now feminine energy is going to carve it into a statue. Feminine energy, shadow energy has a lot of that. Now, if they're so similar, what makes them different? I know. I feel that too, right? So, when it comes to your shadow holds anything and everything you've ever done ever in your life. And as people, there are things we forget about, and it holds in our shadow, in our unconscious, the things we cannot see. The shadow is also a lot of times the feminine cosmic principle that links us to our other spiritual beings in other places through the bottom half of our chakras, versus the light brings us closer to other spiritual beings and enlightenment through the higher parts of our chakras. That's how I feel. You can get to it because the chakras, they act like, oh, your bottom chakra, that's just like the stopping point, it keeps going. Now, there are certain religions that will say if you go down, that's how you're going into the evil, so to speak, right? But the irony is like, even if you look at evil, technically it's like mishaps galore. It's just like you keep trying to do something, it doesn't work because it's not for you. And so that's why they always say the road to hell is paved in good intentions, because it's the idea of like, I'm just gonna keep doing this and failing, but it's not for me, will lead you towards hell. If you keep trying and keep doing and improving and it is for you, you go up towards the light, to the higher chakras. So if you want to go towards the heaven, so to speak, you keep growing. And again, let's talk about the thing, because that's the masculine principle. See, masculinity holds in the tarot, astrology, and also in other things, is what we call wealth and poverty. Because feminine energy is you're fine and you're perfect just the way you are. So it's in the middle, chilling, fine and happy and perfect just the way it is. But if you want wealth, then you have to be able to with your masculine energy up towards the growing towards what's for you versus growing to what's not for you. Anything that's not for you would be that road to hell paved in good intentions. Now, when as people you think of yourself as your own little ecosystem, the earth is made up of mostly water and earth. Earth is mass. Our bodies work the same way. The earth is 75%, 70% water. So is the human body. The earth has 20 to 25% of mass. So is the human body. It's a reason we're earthlings are made of the earth. There is air all around the world. And then there's the fire. We have fire on the earth. But how would the earth get fire without us making it? Electricity. Electricity, something comes down, sparks, fire. So the fire in us, again, is electricity. Why do you think we can start our hearts with basically a car battery practically, right? Because we also have electricity going through us. Because our plasma in us is that fire, is that electricity. So the human and the earth has the 4 elements. The ether is the only thing that, people get a little confused about and how they agree on it or disagree about how it works. And so you might have different whatever. So why is that important? Why is this important? Because we have a way of seeing things because of how our societies work. Depending on yours depends on how they feel. But I really love the ideas of Carl Jung and collective consciousness. And what are the things that overlap that's like, y'all, it don't matter where you was from, we all was thinking the same thing. We didn't go on a boat and say anything to each other. We just all agree on this, right? You agree? We agree? Yeah. So, and then you meet each other, you're like, oh my gosh, I had the same idea. What? Collective consciousness is just something we do as humans. It's something that we all come up with. Astrology is one of them. Every culture came up with their own zodiac situation. And then certain people did go travel to other people's and then make these bigger ones, like the Greeks. The Greeks would travel around the Mediterranean and basically be like, oh, what are you doing in the Middle East? What are you doing in Northern Africa? What is the rest of Europe doing? Cool. I got that. Let me put it together. And so that's why the Greek astrology is one of the more dominant ones other than India's, or with Vedic, I would say. And then also like the Chinese zodiac by year. There you go. By the year. So what year are you born in? So when I was a kid, my grandma and me used to do this stuff all the time, and she had this really cool book that was your zodiac and your Chinese like astrology all put together. And so I would look at it and be like, oh, that's so cool, like I'm a Scorpio monkey, okay, what does that mean? And years later, like on my own accord, I found this website called Primal Astrology. And it basically says that, except they say it way better. They say you're Western and you're Eastern sign. I was like, oh, thank you, finally, because I've been trying to explain this. It's been difficult. So, so I'm going to put a link to that in the description. Go check it out. It is interesting. It's fun. So when I looked up mine, I was a raven, and I was like, ooh, it gives you like a whole new animal, y'all. Like when you look at people, it'll be like, oh, so you're a sloth, or you're an aardvark, or you're like this exotic rabbit, or just it's really cool stuff. A tiger, like, like one of my siblings is a Wolverine. I didn't even know Wolverines were real. I thought that was just a character in X-Men. No, it's a mini bear. It's like the little people of bears. I love it. So it's real cute. It's real adorable. Go do it. That's just a side note. Coming back to the video though, why I brought that up, because it's to bring up the point of like different cultures will bring up very similar ideas, and if you can kind of like put them together in a certain way, it really like makes sense. I just and I don't know how else to say it like that. It just makes sense. And so this is how it's made sense to me, and why I feel like other people also bring this up, but maybe just not in the way I'm saying it. So that's like my way of saying no, it's in math. It's in spirituality with the elements. And then the last thing was psychology. In psychology, we use this method a lot to talk about people and where to put them when it comes to certain like specific types of things. Like here's a good example. And so the idea of that, you have the straight and you have the gay, but we do have bis and pansexuals up here, and then we have asexuals down here. Yeah, you forgot about them. Okay, so this is why I talk about the both and the neither, and the negative and the positive. And the negative is not inherently negative, like that means a bad thing. It literally means you take something away. Or as I like to think of it, origin stories, like what the norm, yeah, like almost like what the norm is. I hate to say it like that, but yeah, in this concept, in this way of explaining it, right? So up here then you would, when you plot people, it would be like, well, I am definitely, I'm just, okay, well, am I closer to this side, or I'm closer to, you can do like a better situation there of like explaining yourself. Okay. So the reason why I was like, this concept is everywhere. It's everywhere. The idea that you can break everything down into fours, into basic principles of fours, is much better than breaking things down to concepts of two, because it leaves for more nuance. Because again, when you have it not so linear, then technically, and you use this T shape, well, if you put a circle around it, it's a circle. So it makes the world, instead of being a line, be more circular. Okay, so that was just something that I really need to get off my chest about how I feel about that. And how does that tie to spirituality and all that fun stuff? Well, basically the reason why the four concepts to me is very important is because, again, it goes down to the four elements. And for me, the fifth element, the thing that is the origin point, 0, is the ether. Because the ether can be anywhere. The ether is origin. It's all this space in between. It do whatever it want to do. Now, when Spirit ever explains this to me in other ways, like as a organism, like an actual 3D organism, I can't actually draw it very well, but it makes it kind of crazy in the sense of, like, because it's 3D, the 3 points of where water and earth and fire are here, but instead of air being down here like I had showed you before, air is everywhere around it. Air is a messenger. If you think about how Mercury was the type of god that went around messaging, I feel like that's why that's Gemini energy. Gemini is the air sign. And so the idea that air can just be doing whatever the fuck it want to do. Just go wherever it want to do. And can go and say hi to all three of the other elements. And it's hanging out here with the ether. So that used to be like, if you bring it off the page, then that's how it would look. And then these would actually configure differently. And then the lines that are in between it, these ley lines, would be ether, also connecting all of the elements as well together. So I have like all these drawings in my notebooks about it. And I remember one day I was making one and it got very serious, is my point. And later when I got into Vedic astrology, I realized these boxes looked just like Vedic astrology, and I was like, oh my gosh, no wonder I had to get into it, because I was already drawing about it beforehand. And so sometimes things that are through the ether, through spirit, they're the collective consciousness, we all just do it. You can be told something from spirit and then have it be like shown to you as like, oh my gosh, this is real because other people do it too. It's like a real thing and I didn't even know the thing I was just doing is real. Okay, so it is legit. And so there's things like that I would encourage people during this time. If you have time to just sit with yourself and draw or come up with ideas or whatever, you will be surprised that you might see that stuff come up later in your life. You might be somewhere and be like, I've seen that symbol before, I've drawn it. And then it'll be like, oh, it means the blah, 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 blah. And you'll be like, it means the blah, blah, blah this whole time? Because that's what happens to me all the time, especially in the last 2 years. And so every time I'll be like, oh, I can't figure out this thing. Then all of a sudden I'll see something and it'll be like, oh, it was there. It's staring me in the face. So no matter what, most people believe that there's something that controls things that we cannot explain. That's why the phrase "an act of God" usually has to do with weather, because we don't understand how the weather works, and even if we try to make the weather do different things, we still couldn't really do it in the way that we think we can, right? It's still its own situation. It's not our job to make the sun rise. It's not our job to make the sun go back down at night. So it's not something we need to worry about. Once we do try to worry about things like that, it really will make your brain hurt. The thing that you only need to worry about is your ecosystem, and then also the ecosystem on the planet that you're on, because we are part of the planet. That is why we are so symbiotic to it. Now that the planet has gone through a shift because people want to stay inside, it shows a lot that this is a time to get closer to the planet. And that's why I've been wanting to make this video on and off for months, and I never do. But now I have to, because it's needed more than ever. Do that. But thank you so much for staying. I love you. I love me. I love us. I love we. I'll see you soon with another rant.